After the end of the world arrived, I was bound to a childbearing system. As long as I thrust my hips against someone, that person would immediately conceive my child, regardless of whether they were male or female. So when I was being frantically pursued by the boss and had nowhere to run, I stiffened my neck and thrust my hips at him twice. Think carefully. If you kill me, your child won't have a father in the future. 1. After the end of the world came, the earth was overrun with monsters. In order to protect themselves, the survivors all clung tightly to the thighs of the system. Some people were bound to the overbearing CEO system, and they could make monsters go bankrupt just by waving their fingers. Some people were bound to the succubus system. As long as they gave a flirtatious glance, no matter what kind of monster it was, it would fall head over heels in love with them without thinking. And I was bound to the most useless childbearing system. When I saw the words on the screen, I instantly broke down. My teammate Jason beside me laughed so hard that he almost fell over. It's the end of the world, and there's actually someone still preparing for the coddled wife literature. You can't even save your own life, and you still want to have children. You women can only be bound to such a useless system, right? But he didn't see that there was a line of system prompts at the very bottom dash, after being bound to the childbearing system. As long as the host makes a hip-thrusting motion towards any species, the other party will immediately conceive your child. I exclaimed. Can men also get pregnant? Yes, men will give birth twice as fast. If it's a rooster, it can even lay an egg immediately. I took a deep breath, but I heard Jason still chattering on. Your useless system doesn't deserve to be in a team with us, but I think you're good-looking and so fertile. He chuckled and licked his lips greasily. Why don't you follow me? If you can have 108 babies in one litter, I can reluctantly protect you. I stood up silently, took a step back and looked at him, and then imitated the movement taught by the system and thrust my hips at him. 2. What are you doing? Jason glared. Are you insulting me? Is this an insult? I rolled my eyes. You're too fragile, aren't you? Isn't this the same as when you whistled at us while peeing on the roadside? Jason was irritated by what I said and raised his hand to rush at me, but the next second his stomach sank and he knelt to the ground. What's going on? Why has my stomach become so big? Because you're pregnant with my child. I enlarged the system prompt, and he finally saw the line of words clearly and immediately became anxious. Someone, catch her quickly. Then, he activated the overbearing CEO system and kept waving his hands at me. However, nothing happened. I'm so poor with a monthly salary of 3,000 yuan that I have nothing to go bankrupt. The female team member beside me rushed over and started using the succubus system on me without saying a word, so I instantly fell madly in love with her and started thrusting my hips at her frantically. By the time she urgently stopped the system, I had already made her have 8 babies in one litter. The people around were filled with horror and didn't dare to come near me anymore. So I packed my things smartly and prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Jason hugged my calf. You can't leave, you got us pregnant, and you still want to shirk your responsibility. I kicked him away and snorted disdainfully, uttering the classic sentence, who knows whose child is in your stomach? Besides, I just shook my hips at you twice. You want me to take responsibility for the rest of your life? You're really good at moral kidnapping, aren't you? After saying that, I left smartly, on the way. I casually shook my hips at a bus, and it gave birth to a small car from the rear compartment. Look, just by adding the character, public, in front of the word, car, the speed of giving birth has increased several times. Men are indeed born to have children. 3. After leaving the refugee camp, I started living freely outside. I did everything from seizing other people's tank cars to having a free meal at a restaurant. I basically did whatever I wanted, once someone came to cause trouble for me. I would keep thrusting my hips at them, so the people who originally wanted to kill me started crying and begging me to give them a proper status. I agreed every time and then took the opportunity to run away. As a result, after being so carefree for half a month, just as I was about to go out one day, my limbs were tied up, then, my eyes went dark, and I was covered with a sack. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a magnificent palace. There was a row of men with big bellies standing on both sides of the palace. There were strange-shaped monsters and survivors with their hands on their hips, all looking at me resentfully. Your Highness the vampire, this is the heartless woman, she has been causing trouble constantly in our territory and has already made more than a dozen people pregnant, and she doesn't want to take responsibility. I followed everyone's gaze and saw that on the throne at the very front. There was a man with black hair and red eyes, looking at me with contempt. Step forward, what's your name? I quickly took a few steps forward and carefully examined his face. His jaw was smooth, his nose was tall and straight, his beauty was profound, and he was a standard mixed-race handsome guy. After being stared at by me for a long time, a trace of disgust appeared in his eyes. I'm asking you a question, what are you staring at me for? I chuckled, because you're handsome. I've never seen someone as handsome as you. There was a sudden intake of breath around, and everyone surrounded me angrily. You lecherous woman, you've caused so much trouble to so many people, and you actually dare to flirt with His Highness Vander openly. Your Highness, there's no need to judge this kind of person, just execute her directly, oh, so your name is Vander, it's really a nice name. The vampire was so angry that his cheeks turned red, and he pointed at me tremblingly. You human are really evil and lustful. I, the prince, will now give you a chance. Among so many people you've made pregnant, you must choose one to take responsibility for, otherwise, I'll throw you into the carnivorous area and let you fend for yourself. The monsters in the carnivorous area were extremely ferocious. They not only ate humans raw but also didn't spare their own kind. Therefore, some of the friendly monsters moved here to live with humans, although they repelled each other. There hadn't been any major incidents. I swallowed a mouthful of saliva. I didn't want to be torn into pieces, so I finally compromised and turned around. I can't do it, Your Highness, I really can't. They're all monsters, and they're so ugly. Vander lowered his eyes, suddenly teleported beside me, and directly grabbed my neck and carried me out of the window. In that case, there's no need to send you to the carnivorous area. I'll just smash you into powder directly. I looked at the cliff at my feet, and in fear, I hugged his arm tightly and begged for mercy. Seeing that he was really about to let go, I gritted my teeth, concentrated all my strength on my abdominal muscles, and then thrust my hips at him with all my might. Instantly, Vander's belly grew bigger. I was about to suffocate, and I pointed at his belly and said weakly, "You're already pregnant with my child. Think carefully. If you kill me, your child won't have a father in the future." Vander's body shook, and he looked at his gradually bulging belly in horror, and then suddenly threw me to the ground. What did you do to me?" The prince, looking at him, I smiled and took out the classic words again. "Don't you men all like to be called father? I just helped you fulfill your wish. What, aren't you satisfied with just 1-5? Seeing that I was about to move again, Vander immediately pounced on me and held my waist tightly. "Enough, don't move anymore." Hearing the commotion, several ministers also chased out. As soon as they entered the door, they saw Vander hugging me tightly, and his belly was still bulging high. The few people were stunned on the spot, and then they heard a roar, "Get out, call the doctor over." After a while, a vampire with pale skin and also having fangs came over and observed his belly for a while. "Your Highness, this child is growing rapidly. It's at least 5 months along." Vander gave me a fierce glare, and then stared at his belly with a cold light in his eyes. "I, the prince, can't bear such a great shame and humiliation. Arrange for a surgery. This evil spawn can't be kept." I quickly rushed over and hugged him. "Your Highness, think twice. This is our child, a living life. Just because it's yours, it can't be kept." I looked at his gritted teeth and tried even harder to persuade him. "I'm willing to take responsibility. Your Highness, please don't abort it. After all, for the sake of the child, he might still spare my life. If the child was gone, I'd probably be reduced to ashes by him." Vander urged for the surgery, but unexpectedly, the doctor also knelt down with a thud. "Your Highness, the child is already quite far along. If there's a surgery, I'm afraid it will also harm you." Now the carnivorous clans outside are eyeing us covetously. Once something happens to you, they will definitely take advantage of the situation. Hearing these words, Vander finally calmed down a bit. The ministers outside were also knocking on the door continuously, saying that the people and monsters who had been harassed by me couldn't wait any longer and were preparing to rush in and demand an explanation. Vander's face looked ugly, and he suddenly picked me up and walked out. The noisy hall fell silent immediately. Your Highness, why is this human still alive? Could it be that she's going to take responsibility? Who did she choose? Vander's face was so red that it was about to explode. He covered his face in shame and anger, and then suddenly lifted his cape. Disperse. The person she chose is me, the king. 6. There was an uproar around, and the ministers were crying with snot and tears. Our Highness is pure and flawless. He hasn't even held hands with a female vampire, but he has actually been defiled by such an evil human. I shouted that I was wronged and quickly expressed my loyalty. I made my teammate pregnant because he insulted me with his words. I made the restaurant owner pregnant because he casually set the price. A plate of fried noodles actually cost me 10,000 yuan. I had no choice but to have a free meal, and those monsters. It was clearly them who provoked me first. I took action to protect myself. How did I become the one deliberately harming others? If you don't believe me, you can go and check. Anyway, there are witnesses in the refugee camp. Seeing that I started exposing them one by one, those who came to cause trouble indeed quieted down. I looked at Vander with his bulging belly and continued to say, and you believed their words and were going to kill me without giving me a chance to explain. I also made you pregnant to protect myself. He was left speechless by what I said, but the minister beside him was so angry that he stomped his foot. You human are too articulate. Do you dare to say that you have no selfish motives? I was silent for a moment, stroked my chin, and carefully looked Vander up and down. To be honest, I really do, but it's not a selfish motive, it's a lustful one. The minister was so angry that he fainted on the spot. Vander's beautiful face was like a ripe apple, and he pointed at me angrily. Lock her up for me, before the matter is investigated clearly. She's not allowed to harm anyone else. 7. I thought I would be locked in a dungeon, but unexpectedly, I was taken to a magnificent room. In the following week, someone brought me food on time every day, and they avoided me like the plague. They put down the food and ran away, not disturbing me too much at all. I was very touched by this. I didn't expect that in the apocalypse, there would be such a paradise for otakus, but just as I opened the door as usual to get the food at night, the servant dodged and rushed in directly. I was startled and immediately scolded him. Which delivery guy are you? Do you believe that I'll complain about you? You've confused the situation. There's no delivery service in the apocalypse, is there? The servant took off his hat and revealed a familiar face. Brother, why are you here? You're not here to rescue me, are you? I looked at this room and suddenly felt a bit reluctant. Then can you come back tomorrow? Mainly, there will be pork knuckle rice at noon tomorrow, and I want to finish eating it before leaving. All you think about is eating. He gave me a look of hating iron for not becoming steel. Don't worry, you don't have to come with me this week. That vampire really investigated those who caused trouble for you and found that they were the ones who provoked you first. He has already sent them away. When I came to find you, I saw them having a meeting in the hall and discussing that they would release you tonight. Then my pork knuckle rice would be ruined. I was a bit disappointed but didn't dare to say it. My brother Travis and I rarely met after the end of the world arrived. He followed a group of survivors to form a team and fought against and killed monsters everywhere. I heard that he had already become the leader, but since he wasn't here to take me away, what was he here for? Travis had a complicated look in his eyes and suddenly changed the subject. That vampire is the leader of this group of monsters. Do you know that? I nodded, and a bad premonition emerged in my heart. Our team has declared war on the monsters. Now you can get close to their leader. And this is a great opportunity, as long as you kill him. Our team will be able to win 100%. 8. My face became a bit stiff, and I quickly took a step back. But Vander has my child in his belly. He looked at me like I was a fool and suddenly laughed. My dear sister, he's a vampire, and you're a human. That's not our child. It's just a monster. Hearing these words, I suddenly felt a bit uncomfortable. But the disaster of our humans wasn't caused by them. It's those carnivorous clans that started the war, not them. Maybe we can resist the carnivorous clans together. Humans won't cooperate with monsters. Those vampires are all monsters without intelligence, and that prince is even more of a brainless person. A cold light flashed in Travis's eyes, and he suddenly stared at me intently. Don't forget that you're a human. If you speak for those monsters again, You won't be my sister anymore." After saying these words, he left. I was a bit annoyed and regretted saying those words. But when I heard that Vander had spent a week investigating the truth, I was really touched for a moment. In this apocalypse, everyone speculates about and calculates each other, and this kind of fool would actually spend time seeking fairness and justice. How could such a person be brainless? I sat down leaning against the door, but suddenly saw a stack of books hidden under the bed. Vander's name was written on them, and there were dense notes, which were respectively: Success Studies for Microbusinessmen, The Prince's Handbook, How to Be a Leader as a Troublemaker, Becoming a King in 7 Days. Just read this one book. I was silent for a moment, quietly put the books back, and then silently apologized to my brother. He really was brainless. 9. At noon the next day, Vander knocked on the door. He said that he had finished investigating all the people who came to find me and found that it was indeed as I said. That they were the ones who picked the fight first. As he was talking, his face suddenly turned red. Actually, my requirements aren't high, as long as your character is okay. Since you didn't deliberately hurt anyone, then I can accept you temporarily, but don't be too happy too soon. Before the child is born, you can live here. To let everyone know your identity, you can wear my ring first. I stared at his opening and closing mouth, not hearing clearly what he said at all. And just wanted to kiss him. No, that's not right. I can't forget my righteousness because of lust. I still bear the obligation to save humanity. Last night I had already thought about it. Since Vander is a vampire, what he should be most afraid of is the sunlight. So I grabbed the curtain beside me and pulled it open suddenly. The moment the sunlight shone in, my other hand was lifted up, and then it seemed that something was put on it. I looked down in confusion and saw a shining diamond ring on my ring finger, and the monsters outside the window also looked towards this side one after another, and then there was a burst of exclamations. My God, His Highness has proposed to that human. Can't be. Has His Highness fallen in love? It's over. His Highness is going to have a child for love. The rumors around spread faster and faster. I looked at Vander awkwardly. His face was gloomy, his hand was still stiffly raised in the air. And he glared at me through gritted teeth. You scheming human, actually used such despicable means to force me to give you a status. No, it's a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to force you. I wanted to kill you. I quickly explained that it was just an accident and pulled the curtain back. But, aren't you vampires supposed to be afraid of sunlight? Humph, that was thousands of years ago. We've been eating gutter oil for so long, and our constitutions have long since evolved. I secretly cursed in my heart that I would kill all those who sold the unscrupulous gutter oil sooner or later. 10. Although Vander was still dissatisfied with me, his tone was much softer than before. You can move freely from today on, and I'll have someone prepare a new room for you. I was taken aback and pointed at the big bed in front of me. Can't I just sleep here? I like this bed. I'll definitely have insomnia without it. Mainly I had hidden a lot of snacks under the bed. If I left like this, wouldn't I be benefiting others? His face turned red again, his eyes flickered, and he looked at me hesitantly. Do you humans all like to be so indirect, using the excuse of liking my bed? Actually what you want to sleep with isn't the bed, but me, right? The more Vander spoke, the more excited he became. When he spoke, 2 inconspicuous fangs were revealed, making him look especially cute instead. You just got a status and you're still not satisfied. Now you want my body too. I won't agree. Get out of here quickly. With a bang, the door closed, and I was pushed out, looking confused. What just happened? Do vampires all like to misinterpret things like this? And why does my heart beat so fast when I look at his flustered appearance? The first rule of being a woman: if you think a man is cute, that's the beginning of your downfall. I quickly patted my face to keep myself calm and went out to wash my face by the way, but just a few steps away. Something suddenly rushed out from the corner, covered my mouth violently, and dragged me into a room. Before I could see who it was, 2 cold snake tails wrapped around me. I heard that you can make men pregnant. Can you help us? 11. As the sunlight shone in, I finally saw the faces of the 2 people. They had oval faces with upturned outer corners of their eyes. Their 2 identical faces were extremely charming, and their lower bodies were a greenish-blue snake tail. I was stunned and stepped back in horror, but was wrapped around and pulled forward again. Don't be afraid. We are the only ones in this palace who can save you." The two of them leaned closer and lay weakly on my shoulders. "Do you want to make a deal?" The two faces were so handsome that it was hard to tell whether they were male or female, and they kept getting closer to me. I closed my eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and asked, "What kind of deal?" "We snakes are naturally lustful and have always wanted to reproduce offspring, but unfortunately, males can't get pregnant, so you help us get pregnant, and we help you escape from here. How about it?" It seemed that they could see my indecision. They suddenly retracted their snake tails and turned into human form, and then lifted up their shirts. Their golden and shiny abdominal muscles instantly made me stare blankly. "We won't pester you too much, but as long as you want. We can also come at your call." I felt a rush of heat in my nasal cavity. When I touched it, I actually had a nosebleed. It's just a matter of thrusting my hips. But suddenly the image of Vander gritting his teeth flashed in my mind, and I felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. Moreover, I still have a mission uncompleted and can't leave here yet, seeing that they were getting closer and closer again. I took a deep breath and suddenly shouted, "No, stay away from me. I only have Prince Vander in my heart. I'm so in love with him that I can't extricate myself. I won't betray him." There was a moment of silence in the air. I slowly opened my eyes and saw Vander at the door looking shocked. 12. "What are you doing?" The two snake demons immediately tried to run away, but were caught back by several guards behind them. Vander rushed in hurriedly, and circled around me to look at me. "Are you not injured? Is there anywhere on your body that hurts?" Remembering my shout just now, I was so embarrassed that my toes curled. "I'm fine, but did you hear what I said just now?" His body shook, and he didn't answer. He just carefully checked me once. He stood up only after making sure that I wasn't injured. "I heard it. I didn't expect you to like me so much. I'm sorry. I suspected that you had other intentions before." I was just about to explain when Vander pressed me into his arms. "From today on, I will definitely treat you well and will never doubt you again." I was completely stunned. Help! Why is this misunderstanding getting bigger and bigger? But then I remembered the information I investigated. Vampires lower their vigilance when they sleep, so I immediately hugged him and asked, "Then can we still sleep together today?" His ears turned red. It seemed that he was desperately making a decision, but finally he nodded. "Yes, aren't you afraid that I'm after your body?" "Afraid, but it's okay." Whoosh, I whistled and immediately pushed him away and walked out. "Where are you going?" Vander chased after me in a panic. I raised my eyebrows at him. "Didn't you say we were going to sleep together?" "I'm going to take a shower first." His body staggered, and he shyly wanted to stop me, but I slipped away quickly. In a short while, I rushed to the kitchen at the end of the corridor. Tonight is a good opportunity. I have to choose a suitable weapon first. After going around in a circle, I chose a dagger the size of a palm and hid it in my sleeve and went to the bathroom. 13. When I came out after taking a shower, Vander was already lying on the bed. He was wearing a black silk nightgown, and his already cold white skin was set off like a shining gem. His deep eyebrows and eyes were quiet and cold, and only the tips of his ears were already completely red. Thinking carefully, it seemed that every time I saw him, he was blushing. I walked to the other side. When I lay down, I secretly hid the dagger under the pillow and then started waiting for him to fall asleep. Vander was lying on his back, politely keeping a distance from me, but his eyes were wide open and bright. Sleepiness welled up, and I could only pinch my thigh to stay awake. I persisted for an hour. I quietly turned my head sideways, but met his gaze looking over. In an instant, I was so scared that I almost screamed, "No, why haven't you fallen asleep yet?" Vander looked at me a bit awkwardly. "We vampires rarely sleep, and I just finished hibernation. I'm not sleepy recently." Damn it, I miscalculated again. I turned over irritably and then realized that there was a thin layer of cold sweat on my back. It was sticky and very uncomfortable. It seemed that a lot of charcoal had been added to the fireplace in the bedroom today. The temperature was so high that there was an inexplicable feeling of restlessness. Remembering the thing I drank before going to bed, I frowned warily. "What did you give me to drink just now? I'm so hot." Vander was stunned for a moment, and then looked at the cup blankly. "It's just hot water." I felt embarrassed and turned around silently. "But are you really hot?" "Sorry, because the body temperature of vampires is very low." I was afraid that you would be cold if you slept with me, so I turned up the temperature, as if to verify these words. He stretched out his hand beside my face. Suddenly, a cool feeling came out. I immediately grabbed his hand and pressed it against my face. Don't move, it's too hot, let me cool down for a while. I closed my eyes. I didn't need to think to know that he must be blushing again. The fingers on my face stiffened slightly, and it seemed that he wanted to pull his hand back. Why are you hiding? Didn't you say you would treat me well? Why can't you even fulfill this small request, instantly? He stopped moving. 14. After staying like this for a while, I suddenly thought of a question and opened my eyes to look at him. Aren't you a vampire? If you're also vegetarian, then how do you survive? His eyes trembled, and then he slowly shook his head. Actually, I'm not a pure-blooded vampire. My mother was a vampire, but my father was human. That's why I'm not afraid of sunlight. And I don't have the habit of drinking blood. I was a bit surprised and couldn't help sighing. It turns out that humans and vampires can also have children. It must be true love, right? Vander's face froze, and he suddenly lowered his eyes. It's not. He looked at me for a long time, suddenly pulled his hand back, and looked at me seriously. Let me tell you a secret. Vampires have endless lives, and those who drink their heart's blood can also obtain eternal life. My heart suddenly trembled, and I realized what he was going to say. So your mother, yes. A trace of sadness flashed in Vander's eyes, and he turned to look at the ceiling. My mother was killed by my father. Their relationship from the very beginning was by humans to achieve eternal life, so I've always been wary of humans. I think they are selfish and hypocritical, and they can play with sincerity at will to achieve their goals. A thick layer of contempt appeared in his eyes. I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my heart and subconsciously shrank back. However, the next second, my hand was grabbed by Vander. But you're different. You're the first person who likes me so much. You're very sincere and straightforward. Actually, I also like you quite a lot. When I heard such a confession, I should have been happy, but at this moment, I just wanted to cry. I was clearly the most hypocritical and selfish person. There is no such thing as liking and honesty. All my closeness to him is just to kill him. How can I have the face to listen to these words? 15. You made me believe that there are still many kind humans. Vander pulled my hand and placed it on his belly. What's more, we have a child, which means we have a home, so I plan to cooperate with the human leader after giving birth to the child and resist the carnivorous clans together. I couldn't listen anymore. Before he could finish speaking, I pulled him over and hugged him in my arms. Enough, don't say any more. Let that mission go to hell. Tomorrow I'll go find my brother and tell him Vander's thoughts. We should clearly be on the same front and can't keep killing each other like this. His body stiffened for a moment, but soon he hugged me back, and his muffled voice came from my chest. It's so warm. Will our home be this warm in the future? I nodded heavily. It will definitely be. Held by me, Vander actually fell asleep, and I thought about it all night. I got up early the next morning and planned to go find my brother. Vander was a bit worried. The child was growing very fast. According to the doctor's inference, he should give birth in the next few days. I promised him that I would come back tonight and then quickly left the city. But the moment I left here, there was suddenly an explosion behind me. The high wall of that palace collapsed as the sound, and in the swirling sand and dust, my brother walked over with a smile. My dear sister, you really did me a big favor. 16. There was a buzzing in my ears. Realizing what was happening, I rushed towards the direction I came from. However, the next second, I was hugged around the waist by Travis and thrown heavily to the ground in a tight encirclement. Let me go. What on earth did you do? He smiled and threw away the remote control in his hand and waved at the army in the distance. What did I do? Of course, I'm attacking those monsters. My dear sister is about to defect. Of course, I have to take action quickly. It's not a defection, I quickly explained and rushed over to stop him. Listen to me, Vander intends to cooperate with us. We don't need to fight at all. Travis turned his head impatiently and pushed me aside violently. My dear sister, you're too naive. Everyone is afraid of death. Cooperation is unreliable. Only by enslaving them can we make them into scapegoats and make them fight against those carnivorous clans. I looked at him in disbelief and actually felt a bit of strangeness. Why do we always have to start a war? Why do people always have to die? War can create heroes, and death can bring victory. He looked at me crazily. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something and tore off a tiny bug that was almost invisible from my shirt. But don't worry, we won't die because your brother has found a way to achieve eternal life. My body stiffened, and suddenly I felt cold all over. You heard what Vander said, right? That's why you couldn't wait to attack his palace, just to capture him and take his heart's blood. Seeing his silent appearance, I suddenly rushed over and slapped him. You've been using me all along. No wonder you never came back to see me. You didn't come back when I was bullied in the refugee camp. And you didn't come back when I was insulted by my teammates, but you came back just when I got close to Vander. It turns out that you just regarded me as a pawn. His eyes were fierce, but he suddenly grabbed my shoulders. I'm correcting you, look at what you're like now. You're as stupid as that vampire. Do you really like a monster? So what if I do? I suddenly thought of Vander's face that always pretended to be serious, and a sour feeling welled up in my heart. He believes in me, protects me, and treats me well. I realized it too late. Sometimes, humans may not even be as good as monsters. I was shaking all over. I wiped my tears and looked at him. From now on, you're no longer my brother. Travis sneered and shouted behind me, what's the use of you going back now? Our people have already told him the truth, and he won't believe you anymore. 17. But I still went back to the palace. Because this attack was too hasty, only half of Travis's team came. Their goal was clear, which was to capture Vander alive, so they completely ignored the other monsters, and most of them managed to escape. At the moment, the palace was desolate and silent. Vander was locked in the dungeon. The guards at the door tried to stop me, but were stopped by Travis, who came along. He said to let me go. Anyway, I couldn't do anything. The dungeon was gloomy and damp. I saw several ministers who were locked up, and Vander in the innermost part. His long hair hung down, and he curled up in the corner. His fair skin was slightly grayish, and he looked haggard, sitting there with his head tilted. Vampires have a keen sense of smell. He smelled my scent, but didn't turn his head. I saw his bulging belly and felt extremely heartbroken. Sorry, I didn't know this would happen. He didn't answer. I used the dagger to break the iron chains and rushed over to pull him. Come with me, I'll take you out of here. But he withdrew his hand and just shook his head lightly. You go. No, I can't leave you behind again. I touched his hand, then took off my coat and put it on him. Tears kept falling. Sorry, I lied to you. It's all my fault. Can you trust me one more time? I just counted the number of guards. My brother won't really kill me. I will definitely get you out. But Vander shook his head again. You'll be in danger too, won't you? His eyes, which were always flickering, were now dull. His fingers gently caressed my cheek, and his voice was low and slow. I don't blame you. Don't feel burdened. I was a bit stunned and looked at him in disbelief. What did you say? 18. Vander pulled the coat down and put it back on me. Your brother came, and I knew it. He forced a bitter smile, looking sorrowful. I was outside the room when you were talking. A vampire's hearing is very sharp, and I heard everything you said. I've always known that you wanted to kill me. My breath caught, and my heart ached so much that I could hardly breathe. Then why did you still keep me by your side? Aren't you afraid that I would really? Before I could finish, he slowly shook his head. Because you said it from the beginning, you never wanted to hurt anyone. You were just forced to do so and couldn't help it. The tears at the corner of his eye were wiped away, and Vander smiled at me. And I guessed right. That night, what I got wasn't a dagger, but a hug. You didn't want to kill me because you cared about me. I sniffled, pushed his hand away, and suddenly stood up. This isn't the time to say these things. Stand up first. I'll take you out of here. I can't leave. Vander sighed. They want to take my heart's blood, so they won't let me go. Since I got pregnant, my magic power has disappeared, and I can't escape. He suddenly touched his belly, and his eyes became gentle and reluctant again. They promised that they would let me give birth to the child first. Then you can take the child and leave. After all, I still have a home. Looking at his sad but pretending to be strong appearance, I finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Enough. Don't always be like this just because you're cute. You clearly have feelings but pretend to be arrogant and restrained. Now you're clearly sad but pretend to be magnanimous and willing to give up. It's just a child. I'll give you one in the future. Then I took a deep breath and called out the system in my mind. This time, I want to unbind with you. 19. The system was a bit shocked and asked me several times repeatedly, do you really want to unbind with the system, host? You've seen it. This system is almost invincible in the apocalypse. Are you sure you want to unbind? Sure. I only heard a burst of system noise in my ear, and then came Vander's exclamation, the child, where's my child? He lifted up his clothes, and there was nothing but his nice muscle lines underneath. That child disappeared along with the system. Vander was shaking all over. He suddenly stood up and shouted at me angrily and sorrowfully, how could you kill our child? How could you be so heartless? I clapped my hands and cheered beside him. Yes, 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 that's the angry emotion, more of it. Then lead everyone out of here. Vander kicked down the high wall, and while crying and wailing, he led me away. Child, my child. It was like there was a boiling kettle in my ear. I didn't feel anything until I was so annoyed by the noise that I became numb. Then I saw him stop. In front of me was actually Travis's army base. I exclaimed, are you crazy about the child? You don't have to come here to seek death, do you? Vander just sniffled sadly, wiped his tears, and led me in. As soon as the people inside saw him, they greeted him and quickly nodded and apologized. Only then did I recognize that this person was the deputy leader of that combat team. It turned out that he had already proposed cooperation to Vander, but this decision had always been forcefully stopped by Travis, and he even attacked Vander's palace without the other party's knowledge. I've already communicated with my superiors and will cancel Travis's position, and we will also help repair the palace. We hope you can forgive us and that it won't affect our cooperation. When everything was solved and we went back, Travis and the others had indeed been taken away. The escaped monsters also came back. Vander said he didn't blame them, everyone wanted to live, and running away was just an instinct. What needed to be done next was for humans and monsters to cooperate together, repair the palace, then resist the invasion of the carnivorous clans, and maintain their home together. And I also planned to start my relationship with Vander anew, without any impurities, the kind that's purely proper. 20. Unexpectedly, the repair of the palace took a very long time, and it took a whole month to complete. During this period, Vander was discussing the subsequent plans with the deputy leader, and we couldn't even meet. It was already a month later when he came back. I prepared roses and handed them to him when he walked into the palace. Yes, men will give birth twice as fast. If it's a rooster, it can even lay an egg immediately. Of course it's a confession. I smiled and walked over, put my arms around his neck, and emphasized loudly, this time, it's not out of necessity, but I can't control myself. I sincerely and eagerly hope that you can be with me. Vander quickly covered my mouth, and his ears turned red with shyness. Got it. Keep your voice down, you evil human. I smiled and kissed him. Yes, my innocent vampire, by the way. You still have to compensate me for something. What thing? Vander coughed and whispered 2 words in my ear. Child, Yosh. I licked the corner of my mouth and pounced on him directly. Then let's do it now. What? Now? Here, humans are still so evil.